Hello, BIO100. These are the clarification slides for week 15, in which we focused on using the LinkedIn platform to build yourself a profile and start to network and search for jobs within the platform. So first, though, I wanted to take some time to give some additional comments about last week's submissions, week 14. So I try to give you these clarification slides in a timely manner, so that means sometimes I'm actually creating them before I've had time to thoroughly go through and grade your assignments for that week. And so now that I have had some time to go through and read all of your submissions for week 14, which was focused on part 1 of navigating the job market, I wanted to take some time to address a couple common things that I saw come up in your submissions for week 14. And the first one of those is, in that first part of the assignment, you were asked to list your perceived strengths and then also what you perceive to be your weaknesses. And I definitely saw a trend where a lot of people said one of the things they saw as their weakness was a lack of confidence in their ability to share their opinions or their ideas. And although this wasn't exclusive to women, I definitely noticed a trend where a lot of women in particular were saying this. And I recognize this because this is also something that I also see as my own weakness and have struggled with and worked to improve. And the reason why I bring this up is that there are a couple books that I've read, and I recommended this individually to some of you, but if you're looking for some recommended reading related to these topics of confidence and confidence, especially in women, these are two books that I highly, highly recommend. The one on the left here is called The Confidence Code, and this one is more scientific, and it actually talks about a lot of the research that's been done about how there is, in general, this difference in confidence between men and women, and why that is, what consequences it has, and how it can be combated so there aren't these large differences. So I highly recommend that book. And then this book on the right is not scientific at all, but it's a memoir by the author Glennon Doyle, and this is more of her story of, again, coming to deal with these issues in her own life and having more confidence in herself. So again, I've read both of these books. The Confidence Code in particular has drastically changed the way that I approach my work and how I prepare for things. So I highly recommend these if you're looking for some reading over the summer, for instance. Another thing I saw in the assignments, you were asked to talk about one of the things you're most afraid of in terms of your future career. And many people said that they were afraid of failing, which again, I totally understand. I can definitely relate to that. But what I wanted to point out is that I think it's really important for us, not only at Sex Day and your classes, but really as a society, to normalize failure. And what I mean by that is we're all going to fail at some point or another, like every single person. It's all going to happen to us. But I think we've been brought up in this society where we're taught that failure is bad. And if you fail, that means you will never succeed, and that means you've done something wrong. That's not true. So I think I really want to encourage you to have this shift in your mindset where failure actually equals progress, right? That if you tried something and you fail it, that means that you're learning things, right? And so in some other books I've read, they've talked to some of the most successful people, and those people aren't successful because they've never failed. They're successful because they have failed repeatedly, but they have learned how to recover from that and learn from it. And this actually ties into something we talked about earlier this semester, this idea of a growth mindset, or the idea that even if things are hard right now, you can work at them, learn how to improve, and you can increase your ability to do these different tasks. And so if you have this growth mindset, that'll actually help you to reorient your idea of failure and your ability to learn from it. And this is also related to, I think, specifically career-wise, this idea that we all have, or many of us have, I know I did, where we think that a path to career success looks like this really straight line here on the left. So we have a point A, we have a point B, and the path there is straight, no deviations, no twists or turns. It doesn't look like that. I think it would be great if it did, or it would be easier in a lot of ways, but it doesn't look like that. What it really looks like is this part on the right, where we have all these twists and turns and swirly doops, and that's what my path looked like. So, for instance, when I was an undergrad, until the very end of my undergrad career, I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. And once I finally realized that wasn't the case, that then begged the question of, okay, well, what do I want to do then? And so I shadowed a bunch of different people. I shadowed a veterinarian. I shadowed a physical therapist. And ultimately, I'm none of those things. I'm a marine biologist and a professor. And so my path was really twisty-turvy, and that's normal and that's okay. So I think what I want to encourage you to do is recognize that a perceived failure doesn't mean you can't make it to this end point that you want. It just means that your path to get there might be a little bit different, but you can still end up at that same end point. So remember that. And all of that is relevant to life in general, but failure is also very relevant for science in particular. And in particular, the nature of science and experiments inherently has a lot of failure associated with it. So I know for myself, in grad school, I had a whole slew of failures. I spent months collecting the wrong species of snail. It wasn't the one I thought it was. I was constantly scared of presenting my ideas in lab meeting because I thought my methods would be flawed and people would think I was stupid for presenting that or thinking that was a good way to do things. And so really what this article from a couple years ago, which again is another thing I recommend reading, what it talks about is one of the reasons why we're not having a lot of people go into science these days is because, again, this idea that society teaches us that failure is bad. And so we don't know how to experience a failure and then learn from it and recover from it and make forward progress after that. So again, this is something I highly recommend reading and remembering too as you continue through your biology career here at Sac State, in your lab classes, or if you're doing research in a lab. Remember that there are always going to be setbacks, but if you're able to learn from those and move forward and recognize that if you're failing, that's still some kind of progress, something you can learn from, I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Okay, and again, for our content this week, we didn't have an exit question per se, and because of our shift to online instruction, and we needed to incorporate some other things into that online module. But what I am going to do here is address some questions that students from previous semesters had, so you might have the same questions. So, and this is in regards to LinkedIn. Some students asked last semester if there was a way to add your resume to your LinkedIn account for companies to see. And my response to that is that in a way, your LinkedIn profile itself basically serves as your resume. So it has all of that relevant information there. So I don't think you necessarily need to add a resume. But if you did want to add one, if you follow this link here, it provides some information about how to do that. Basically, in the About or Summary section at the top of your LinkedIn page, there is an option to upload a resume file there. Another question that students asked was related not so much to LinkedIn or finding jobs per se, but to this more general topic of moving forward to the next step in your career after finishing at Sac State. And the question was regard to letters of recommendation. So if you're applying for grad school or for jobs, some jobs require letters of recommendation. And so the question was basically, when should you ask professors for letters of recommendation? Should you wait until your last year of school? Should you ask them earlier? And my recommendation is always to ask your professors sooner rather than later. And at a bare minimum, give them at least 1 month notice in advance of your deadlines. So if you're asking them if you have a letter, for instance, that's due at the end of May, at the very latest, ask them at the end of April so they have some time to prepare that letter. And so if you do have a professor, though, that you encounter before your last year of class, so maybe if you've had 1 or 2 classes with the same professor and you've gotten to know them a little bit and you like their teaching style, or you have some kind of relationship with them and you think that they would write you a good letter, what you can do is ask them about the possibility of them writing you a letter at the end of the semester when you're in their class. And so what that does is it gives the professor a heads up. So for me, for instance, when I write students' letters, I try to include personal anecdotes and examples from when I had them in my class. And so if they ask me at the end of that semester, all that information is fresher in my mind. So it's easier for me to kind of take notes for when I eventually do write the letter, even if that isn't for another year or so down the line. So even if you're not quite at the stage where you're graduating, but if you think you might need a letter, what I recommend is asking ahead of time just to give the professor a heads up. And then you can always provide application specifics and details later. It doesn't need to be exactly then, but just give them a heads up. Hey, I think I might be applying to dental school, or I think I might be applying for master's or PhD programs. Would you be willing to write me a letter of recommendation? Just something like that. So at least they have it in the back of their mind. So that was really all related to this week's content. Again, I'm going to plug student evaluations. If you haven't already completed them, please do so. Remember, they're really important. They're used for my own yearly evaluations. I also read them, use them as feedback to improve my teaching for future semesters. So it will benefit students that come after you. I'm especially interested in feedback related to my particular modules and in-class instruction. Remember, they're 100% anonymous. I don't have access to them until I've already submitted your grade, so there's no way at all that anything you write will affect your grade. So please be honest. To complete them, because everything is online now, you can go to your Canvas course page, and once you click our particular lecture or lab pages, there's a link for course evaluations in the left-hand navigation panel on the bottom. So you'll have to scroll down. It's at the bottom of that list. And these evaluations are only available until Friday, May 8th. So please make sure that you complete those before then. I think the system will send you a lot of automatic reminders until you do that. So if you just take care of it now, then you won't keep getting those reminders. And because this is the last clarification slide, so the last kind of quote-unquote in-class time that I'll have with you, I wanted to acknowledge all your hard work this semester and thank you for all of your engagement and participation in this class. I know that it didn't kind of work out the way we all thought it would. We had to adjust in the middle of a semester there with everything moving to online instruction, but regardless of that, I've still enjoyed learning with all of you, and I hope that you all recognize that you were able to adapt to these changes and be resilient. And I hope you know that I'm proud of you for being able to do that, and you should be proud of yourselves as well. And so in the future, whenever inevitable challenges arise, I hope you're able to remember that you were able to do this hard thing, you were able to adapt, to be resilient. And so that means in the future, you can also do hard things. So that's another thing something I'm trying to adopt in my own life and encourage for other people too, is to remember that we can all do hard things. We can all adapt. We can be resilient, and it will help us in the long run. So thank you for being in my class this semester for BIO100. And I hope if there's ever anything I can do for you in the future, that you don't hesitate to reach out.